So here it is, the last video on astrophysics. Glad you made it through this quite long playlist, as I would imagine. And we're going to be talking about the theoretical of the very early days. Now, we sort of discussed this in the post-inflation chapter. However, I feel like we should formalize what might have happened. So as the universe expanded, different eras of matter emerged from the inflation period. Directly after inflation, about 10 to the negative 43 seconds after, the subatomic particles, which we'll get onto in quantum phenomena, known as quarks and neutrinos, that's theorized, both the matter kind and antimatter kind start to appear. Again, we'll discuss what antimatter, matter we know, but antimatter, quarks, and neutrinos are in later chapters. So once the matter and the antimatter combine, we actually have stable particles because matter and antimatter sort of combine to make something somewhat stable. So this all happened in about less than a microsecond. So this is just a continuation. So after a while, the strong nuclear bonds, strong nuclear force, began to form with the protons and neutrons. So the strong nuclear force is the force that holds all the atoms together in the nucleus so they don't sort of fly away, and began to form what's known as nucleic bonds to make the basic hydrogen and helium atoms. At this point, the electrons are actually still too hot. If you've watched Bill Wirt's History of the Entire World, I guess, you'll remember that the protons and the neutrons were everywhere, but something else was flying around too, but it couldn't join because it's still too hot. So that's actually what happened, was that the electrons were so hot they actually couldn't attach onto these new hydrogen and helium atoms to make them entirely stable. So once the electrons got on to cool down enough, which happened after about 3 by 10 to the 21 years, roughly, they lost their heat energy, and then the electrons themselves actually grappled on to these ionized hydrogen and helium atoms, these heavily ionized atoms, because they have literally no electrons. So at this point, before the universe was considered to be sort of black and empty, but when this period was over, gas began to form because of hydrogen and helium being gaseous elements. So once the electrons bonded, the particles combined together to form heavier elements, beginning with beryllium and oxygen, for instance, which then condensed to form the stars and the galaxies we know today, and then everything falls in a cycle back to how stars form and planets form, or whatever. One thing I didn't actually discuss is in this whole thing is asteroids, but you can pretty much sum up asteroids in a sentence. It's just space debris. So, glad you made it through this entire presentation of astrophysics. Oh god, it's 82 slides, so great job for surviving through them.